Okay, we're here with Weston Martinez. He's running for Railroad Commissioner. It is Tuesday. I'm John Wirtz. With me is Maureen Ball and Bob Bagley. And so, Weston, as we discussed, we'll open up with, or start up with your opening up to 5 minutes. And then we'll go around the table with the Q&A for about the next hour.
Sure. Okay. Sounds great. Well, first off, thank y'all for having me. You know, it's a great time to be serving and have the opportunity to serve here in the state of Texas. So thank y'all for sacrificing to get this thing done. For those that are watching, I'm Weston Martinez from San Antonio, Texas. I've been one of the leaders in the conservative on the conservative battlefield for years. Have some of the right friends, have some of the right enemies, and have always been one of those people that has stood up for our Texas values. My wife Geneva and I have been married 18 years. We have 5 children, and had a long career with one of the corporations here in Texas, the telecom industry. Got involved in the oil and gas industry about when the Eagle Ford Shale started out, and had a great time being involved in the process. And it was just a blessed opportunity. And so, again, we've come to this race with, being a conservative, knowing how to run business, having served as a real estate commissioner for the last 6+ years. So I know the roles and responsibilities of a commissioner for the state of Texas, and the technicalities, and how to, really how to put the public first. And couple that with, again, the opportunities that I've had to work in the oil and gas business. It's been really fun. Helped bring some products to market. Been working on that. Helped with mineral owners dealing with some of their issues. Making sure that owners and operators are coming together and working forward. And I think, when we look at this race, people are really excited to have somebody that is conservative, that has fought for those battles. I was the only Republican in Bexar County that was opposing Joe Straus when he had his first challenger in Matt Beebe, and that is something that I have proudly worn ever since. And again, it was because it was the right thing to do. Nothing against him personally, but again, it was the right thing to do. And in this race for a Texas Railroad Commissioner, we find that the citizens of Texas, they're ready to turn the page in Texas politics, and they don't want business as usual. They want people that are going to put the citizens of Texas first. And having been a commissioner of a large agency, I know that you've got to be fair and predictable. I know that with the railroad commissioner, with the operators that I've talked to, some of the independents, some of the smaller operators, some of the big operators, they want to be in an environment that's fair and predictable. They want to be able to know that, when they're doing something, that it's actually, the citizens of Texas are being put first. And if you do that, then you really bring everybody together. So I want to make sure that we've got, again, re-energized support for what's happening that's good business. I also want to make sure that we're increasing transparency at the Railroad Commission. And, we need to make sure that we have an education program that actually is changing the name of the Texas Railroad Commission. It's something that really points to the transparency that we need in our government at all levels, not only with the Mitch McConnells of the world that I think are part of the problem, but also at our state level and even at our local level. And by changing the name of the Railroad Commission, which has nothing to do with railroads, we all know that, by changing it to something that's appropriate like the Texas Energy Commission, you educate the public, and then you bring more transparency to the agency as a whole. And by doing that, I just know in my heart, when I look at the Bible, and I look at the Constitution, transparency equals better government. It equals just more accountability, and I think that we need more elected officials that are seeking accountability these days than people that don't want it. So I think those are some really key important issues. The other thing is, we've got to really make sure that we're not picking winners and losers. There's a case before the commission right now where a couple of commissioners on there chose to not take action because they want to choose and play Mother May I on a pipeline group so they can benefit some folks that they know, instead of letting the market be the market. And again, there's some technicality to it, but ultimately we have to make sure that we're putting Texas first. And I thank y'all for coming out here tonight and listening to what we have to say. And folks around the state, they know look, when it comes down to it, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-gun, I'm pro-family, I'm pro-Israel, and most importantly, I'm pro-Texas. So if that's who you are watching this here today, I'm the person to vote for, and together, we're going to make sure we keep Texas, Texas, and drain the Texas swamp.
All right, great, thank you. All right, Maureen, you want to kick it off?
With the first question?
Yep.
Yes, all right. What would you like the voters to know about what you would like to see done as a commissioner?
So several key things that I would like to see done. One is I want to repeal the tax that was put in place by the commission, in fact, by my opponent in this particular race. But I want to repeal that tax, and I want them to see that you can operate government in a conservative manner that's fiscally responsible. I also want them to know that we're going to increase the transparency, like I said a minute ago, by changing the name of the Texas Railroad Commission. And in my heart, when we do that, it's going to generate so many additional questions that we're going to have a great conversation with the taxpayers of Texas and with the voters of Texas. So, again, buttoning it down to making sure that we're running it like a business, making sure that we're not picking winners and losers, making sure that, as a commissioner, we're taking votes that are benefiting the general population, not lining our own pockets by votes that we take, appropriately recusing yourself when the time comes up. People that have items before the commission, making sure you're not taking contributions from somebody that either has something before the commission, or if you think they might have something before the commission. I think that we owe it to the state of Texas to be more transparent. And then by doing that, we're going to increase production in Texas. And the voters, when we increase production in Texas, that's when we really, reestablish the Texas miracle. And that's whenever we put more people to work, because the oil and gas sector, it's not a sexy race for a lot of people, but it really is the bread and butter for the state of Texas.
Thank you.
Where does the oil and gas industry in the state of Texas fit into, in your opinion, into Agenda 21 and the UN agenda?
So first of all, Agenda 21, for those that don't know what it is, it's a horrible, gross overreach by governments that are outside of the United States of America, and I totally reject the notion. And so I think that in the Oil and Gas Commission, with the Railroad Commission, I think that you have an opportunity to make sure that we are, the more that we produce here in Texas, the more freedom that we have, because we have more liberty to be in control of our own destiny. If you look back at the crunch of the oil and gas crunch back in the 70s, talk about some pain at the pump. There were some issues there. If you look back just at the natural disaster that we faced with Hurricane Harvey, while that was not by an external force, when production went offline for a week, it was a big impact. Most people don't know that those refineries, they keep about 30 days supply in advance, and they had a pipeline that needed to be inspected before they turned back on one of their refineries. Well, as a result, you had all these people pushing additional consumption, and so it was just a perfect storm. So I would say that, again, there are people across the pond that want to cut our throat, and they don't care what color you are, where you go to church. All they care is that you're an American, therefore you're an infidel. And I truly believe that the more we produce in Texas, the more energy independent we become, and really, as Trump has said, the more energy dominant that we become as a country. And Texas leads that way. And man, I firmly believe the more we produce, the further we get Agenda 21 out of our lives, and the further we probably move the knife away from our throat from people that want to harm us. So, I guess the only thing I could say about that is when we're talking about exportation, we need to make sure we're exporting and not letting people cave us in.
Good. Thank you.
You had mentioned in your opening about a tax, and then I think in response to a question Maureen had, you said your first commission meeting on the vote to repeal the tax. What tax is that?
There was a tax that was created. So interesting fun fact. There was a tax that one commissioner that remains today led the charge on creating. It was a tax on what they call water letters within the state of Texas. And it's something that was provided for free forever, which, right, good government providing something that is necessary. And the agency, the commissioners, 2 commissioners, said that they needed to have more revenue with the Texas Railroad Commission, and to have more revenue, they needed to pass this new tax. They call it a fee, but a fee and a tax, it's all the same thing. It didn't exist before. And that fee now is something that's charged to every operator every time they request a water letter from the Texas Railroad Commission. And just to explain what that means, when you go to drill an oil well, they tell you how far down you have to cement case the water. Amber alert's going off.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I didn't mind.
Please pray for that person, pray they find their name, Jesus, amen. So to use this pin as an example, they would tell you how far down you have to cement case through the drinking water, okay? So that way, whenever you go to finish drilling out your oil well, your cement case through the drinking water, protecting the water supply for the common good. Well, TCEQ provided those letters. To be more business friendly, they brought the office that did that into the Railroad Commission so it could be more timely, because everyone needed it. Well, they've been doing it free for years. And my opponent and one of the commissioners that just left, they justified doing this because, this is a tumultuous industry, and, we're a self-directed agency now, and we have to make sure that we're funded in order to provide the services. Well, let me tell you what. When Governor Perry appointed me to Texas Real Estate Commission, they called me and they said, we're going to make the Real Estate Commission a self-directed agency, self-funded agency, where you have to sink or swim. And we know that you can be convicted of being a conservative business guy every day of the week, and that's why we're putting you on there. So the reason that Rick Perry and the team put me on the Real Estate Commission is exactly the reason opposite they used to generate this new tax. And, as a commissioner, we cut fees, we increased transparency, we increased service. And we're going to do the same thing at the Texas Railroad Commission. So philosophically, I think it's a bad symbol, and by removing it, I think it shows it's a new day.
Thank you.
You mentioned you've been on the Real Estate Commission. Can you compare the dynamics of that with the dynamics of the Railroad Commission?
Absolutely. So the Texas Real Estate Commission is what people consider a Tier 1 commission. You don't operate by yourself. You've got other commissioners that are on there. I was one of the public members on the commission, which allowed me to be the umpire, so to speak, and be able to call balls and strikes, and be able to be really the voice of the public. And the Texas Real Estate Commission oversees all of the realtors in the state of Texas, all of the inspectors of the state of Texas, and also all of the appraisers in the state of Texas. So all of their licensing, all of their required education, all of their, if they've done something incorrectly, we actually hold SOA hearings, just like the Railroad Commission. So you actually adjudicate somebody, and you actually make a decision on if they're losing their license, if they're not losing their license, are there extenuating circumstances, and you want to be in the judge and jury. So it's a great responsibility, because you're taking away somebody's livelihood. So you really have to be, kind of like Solomon, be a good judge, and weigh the evidence appropriately. So I was also chairman of the budget committee at the Real Estate Commission for the last couple of years as well. And so, to give you perspective, we have a little over 10,000 new realtors a year that are applying for new applications in the real estate agency. We've got several hundred employees at the Real Estate Commission, and all of the functions are in there. So the functions are the same for the Railroad Commission and the Real Estate Commission. It's just a different product. So one deals with oil and gas, one deals with all those other things that I mentioned, but other than that, they're categorically the same, even the fact that they're a self-directed agency. And again, as proof, we've cut fees, increased transparency, and increased customer service, while the opposite has happened at the Railroad Commission. But we're going to change that.
You're running on the ticket as a Republican. We have a new state Republican Party chairman that is pushing the Republican Party platform. The platform is started at the lowest level you can possibly start an organization, and that's with the people in the precincts. How do you feel, or do you feel that it's proper for the party to sanction or scrutinize Republicans that are not adhering to the platform?
Absolutely. You know, I was on the Republican Party of Texas, and I was on there at a time whenever the scorecard was the major topic at hand. And the establishment individuals, which we all know who they are, a lot of them either just resigned or are about to get washed out. They were very displeased with my taking the stance that I did, and I responded to them and I said, this is, I went to college on a bull riding scholarship, so I like old westerns where the, good guy gets a girl, bad guy goes to jail. And in that situation, I told him, I said, look, either you ride for the brand or you don't. So my opinion was, why wouldn't we hold these people accountable? And why wouldn't we want people to know how good they're doing or how bad they're doing, so that we can encourage them, exhort them, or whatever the case is. And you had a lot of people that I was shocked and kind of embarrassed and kind of surprised of the way those votes went down. And some people were very, not as many people were for transparency as what I thought was going to be. And again, you kind of notice the theme throughout my political career where we've been at the forefront of those things. And I totally agree we should hold them accountable. I totally agree that, do you have to sign an oath saying I support every plank in the Republican Party? No, you don't have to do that. However, we need to know how good you're measuring up as a Republican, just like I want to know how good the quality of gas is coming out of that pump. If it's not good, somebody needs to know about it. So I think that it's really helped what's happening in the state of Texas, so we can have a new turn for different folks in Texas that actually care about those values and principles. Because look, if you're not for those principles, then go join the other team. We're not going to win in Texas because we put on the other team's jersey. There are people in the Republican Party that believe we need to water it down. Now, Whataburger's successful because they keep selling the same Whataburger and the same strawberry shake, no matter where you are in Texas, and that's the way we need to be.
Good, thank you.
In the first category under general, you mentioned that you won't be taking votes to personally benefit my individual holdings, taking votes meaning at the commission. Do any of the commissioners do that now?
There is some of that has taken place, regretfully. The one opponent that I have in this particular race, there have been votes that have been taken on operators that were working on leases that she maintains, that her and her family maintains. And again, that's, I think it's exactly what the citizens of Texas are upset about. I think it's exactly the kind of political backroom dealing that they don't want anymore. And I think that the rise of social media, the rise of Twitter and Facebook and things like that, I think it's helped bring those things to the forefront. And that's one example, but yes, unfortunately and regretfully.
Okay.
And you should recuse yourself. I mean, look, just to finish, there's nothing illegal about a railroad commissioner having oil and gas mineral leases. But when the operator that is operating your mineral leases comes before the commission, you should post haste, recuse yourself, let people know, I have a conflict, this is what the conflict is, I'm going to stand out, you guys do what you need to do, which is appropriate.
Okay.
You mentioned in the real estate commission that you adjudicated hearings. Do you conduct hearings as a railroad commissioner, and if so, what type of issues would be coming up?
So in the similarity is that it surrounds licensing, sometimes it surrounds corrective action, sometimes it surrounds finding and penalizing somebody that has been non-compliant. Maybe they've got a spill, or maybe they've got a well that's been having trouble, or maybe they're out of compliance with their bond. There's some bonding capacities required at the Railroad Commission. And so those are some of the things that come up, you know, in the real estate commission. Again, the similarity is that, so the mechanics is whoever it is, whether it's a license holder in the real estate commission or a license holder in the oil and gas industry, they will generally present their case through the chain of command with the staff, with the district directors, through the agency. They'll have a hearing with it's called a SOA judge, with a judge that sees these different cases, and there'll be representation from you know, both sides, and the staff attorney is there representing the Railroad Commission. Whoever the license holder is, they've got some sort of representation. They can represent themselves if they'd like. But then that judge will make a ruling, supposed to make a ruling based on findings of fact and conclusions of law. I'm not an attorney, but I try to pay attention. And so then that ruling then comes before the commissioners to agree or to, you know what, I think that this warrants a little more, or maybe this warrants a little less, or we're going to appeal the ruling. So it's kind of that. It really is a good check and balance, because again, we're talking about livelihoods and how we, you know, keep people in business. But again, if you're a bad actor, you need to be out of business. If you're a good actor, we need to, you know, be fair, be predictable, and don't treat anybody any differently just because the size of the company they are or the landowner. Bob?
There's a lot of controversy about shale oil and stuff. What do you see as the future?
Shale oil and stuff in the future. Give me a little more.
Just with shale oil.
Are you talking about the controversy of seismicity issues, or the controversy of the play itself, or just kind of how we're going to get it out of the ground responsibly?
Exactly. More or less how we're going to get out of the ground responsibly.
Got it. So one of the ways that we're going to get it out responsibly is we're going to be fair and predictable in our regulations. So that way we don't have oil and gas operators out there feeling like they've got to do things under the radar in order to be profitable. I think that we have to foster a relationship where people feel that they can ask a question and not worry about being penalized for asking a question. I think that's one of the things that we need to do. I will tell you that with, you know, this position is only a 6-year position. Ironically, I've served longer than 6 years as a commissioner for the state of Texas. So technically, I've got more experience as a commissioner than my opponent. We'll agree that she was at a bigger agency, but in this situation, you really have to realize that this 6-year term, 4 years from now, Trump's going to be gone. And when you've got a situation of possibly facing somebody from the other party in 4 years, we have to batten down the hatches, and we really have to make some progress to making an environment that is really fair and predictable and really business friendly, that responsibly allows people to drill. You know, one of the things you can look at doing is, you know, you've got actual abilities to provide tax credits to individuals for drilling old fields as opposed to drilling a new field. And so there's some smart things we can do to encourage the drilling. But when you're looking at condensate, when you're looking at refining capabilities, when you look at all the stuff that's coming on board, there's really great opportunity. We need to get out of the way and let the market be the market, and not pick winners and losers.
Thanks.
I could say a lot more about that, so feel free to follow up on that.
Go ahead.
Well, no, most people forget that we have stripper wells in Texas. Small little crickets for you guys that are out there listening. All my homeschool family. Yes, I said stripper, but it's related to an oil well. Please know I'm a conservative Republican. I don't go to those places. But you know, the stripper wells make up a big part of the industry. They make a big part of the actual production rate of the daily production in the state of Texas. And man, that's hard work. You got to go around. You got to tinker with them every day. You just kind of got to keep them spit polished and really work hard at it. A lot of the guys, they say, it's about rope, soap, and dope, which is interesting terms, but you really have to make sure that, if you're just worried about the big horizontal fracks that are happening in the Eagle Ford and some of these other places, we're going to miss some opportunities, and we're gonna not develop. But the other thing is pipeline infrastructure. We are way behind on pipeline infrastructure. I talked to an operator today, said he drilled a well, got everything pumping, everything ready to go, and then his common carrier expenses wound up stopping them to where they shut in. They just went ahead and plugged the well because it wasn't viable after that point. So we have to increase our pipeline infrastructure so we can get those stranded assets out.
I'd like to follow up a little bit related to the landowners around the wells and concerns people maybe have with fracking, and how do the public get their opinions and concerns addressed by the state?
So there's I will tell you that we have, and one of the reasons why you want to foster a relationship of trust and predictability with the license holders is so that they in turn foster a relationship of trust and predictability with the landowners. And, the Railroad Commission doesn't regulate mineral rights, okay? But obviously it has a direct impact on what mineral rights are. And one of the things I think is that you have to foster, obviously, right, property rights is a big issue. And I'm a pro-property rights guy. I'm also a pro-business guy. So the question is, how do I maintain an environment that is conducive for the business people to be proper with the landowners? And one of those things is allocation wells. Allocation wells is something that we need to address in the legislative process. It's something that we need to do a better job of showing how those are assigned, how those are declared. That way, the public, they don't feel like they're getting stolen from, and at the same time, the operators can maximize their opportunity. And again, I think there's an opportunity I know there's an opportunity to make that relationship better and kind of clear those lines a little bit to help foster a better relationship between both of them. Wow.
I got caught up in the answer. I forgot my question.
Sorry.
You're talking about the 6 years. And I have a dual question on this one, but the majority of our elections are either 2 years or 4 years, whether it's a state or federal position. Do you know what the reasoning was for having the 6 years? Because you already have a carryover where the entire commission doesn't change all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just for longevity and cohesiveness, but do you know why it's a 6 year? And
Because of the time when the Railroad Commission was established, my belief and my comprehension is that it was to go in line with the senators and their timeline. Because remember, as you guys know, the Railroad Commission was created at a time when the federal government was using railroads to, get into states and to be able to have a pipeline of control through easement via a railroad. So Texas said, we got our own Railroad Commission, God bless y'all, keep on going. And so, to me, I think that's more of the real reason why they did it. I haven't seen an exact hard and fast,
anything in writing?
anything in writing, but to me, that if I was back then, I think I would try to make it the longest we could in order to protect the federal government from having an opportunity to slide between the curtains. And I think it's a good thing. Along that same question, I'll tell you, I'm committed to be here for the full 6 year term. I know that we've had some people in the past that, man, you know what happens when you got a prize bull that starts jumping fences. You got two choices: shoot him or make him hamburger. And I'm thinking about Whataburger again.
There you go.
But I would say that we need to make sure that we have commitment and transparency. Again, I served a 6 year term. I understand the commitment level, and my family and I have talked about it, and we're committed to be in this position for 6 years, and God willing, to be reelected to another 6 year term, and again, just push the Texas miracle, because I truly, in all respect to our friend Lieutenant Dan Patrick and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and some of the other statewides, if people really knew how much of an economic impact this really has on everything, this is really an opportunity for me to give my children the best opportunity to have a good future here in Texas. I respect all the other positions, but I really think this is a really important thing.
Is this going to be a financial hardship on you and your family, or is this going to better your lifestyle?
No, this will not be a financial hardship. It is a hardship from the aspect of, sacrifice time away from your family and things like that. But, it's, again, it's an opportunity to serve. Somebody asked me, they said, what job prepared you most to serve in public office? And I told them it was kind of a heated situation in this debate. And I just off the cuff responded, and I said honestly, when I was a busboy at a Mexican restaurant in San Antonio, Texas, I said, because I had to be willing to do a job that was necessary, that nobody appreciated, nobody ever slapped you on the back, and nobody even knew you were even there unless you weren't doing your job. And I didn't realize how true of a sentence that was, although it was truly from my heart. I sit back and I analyze now, and I think, wow, God really took care of me on that one. But anyway.
True words were never said.
It's easy when it's true.
So Weston Martinez will treat staff with, basic professionalism and respect, and also won't run the Railroad Commission like a dictator, but as a servant leader. Is that the case now? Can you expound on that a little bit?
Regretfully, I think the citizens of Texas have seen what's been happening at the Railroad Commission. They've seen some of the unprofessionalism. Clearly, one of the things that I'm discussing there is the fact that, in the public testimony that was given just a few months ago, our current chairman was asked about the executive director and a conversation that they had the night before, and she lied and said she didn't know anything about it. There's no other way to say it. And then she deflected to the general counsel, and he batted it back to her. She was asked again, and she said, well, you heard what the general counsel said. So then the issue was pushed, and finally it comes out that yes, she met with the executive director the night before without the other commissioners, which is taking official agency action without the commission. And one of the things that you learn when they put you through your training as being a commissioner is you can't do anything unilaterally, and you can't create a quorum outside of a commission meeting. Kind of an important thing. And so in that situation, it was later found out in this same video, which the Texas Tribune put it out, where Christy Craddock went through there, and after she deflected the answer, after she denied the answer, then she came back and she fully confirmed the answer, and even confirmed that she had the general counsel in the meeting with her the night before, and that the executive director was given a choice to and that she had not executed an answer to what her choice was. And regretfully, we know that the executive director decided to resign. Again, as was reported, she was given a choice, resign or be fired. And then one of the other commissioners sent that to the Attorney General's office to ask a question of, did she violate and break the Texas Open Meetings Act? And, I will tell you that I'm not a lawyer, but my answer to that is yes, she did. And again, that doesn't help staff want to work hard and want to come to work and do a good job when they're afraid they're going to be treated like a piece of trash and not be appropriately respected. And so, again, we have to respect everybody. We have to make sure they're treated with dignity and respect. Everybody is there sacrificing, to be there, and we need to make sure that we're providing a conducive work environment. And it's what I've done as a real estate commissioner, and it's what I'd continue to do.
All right, thank you.
One question. With the oil and gas regulation that you'll be involved with, some of that involves fracking, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are some folks in the north part of Texas that are concerned about what fracking has done with their property, the consequences of fracking that they assert has happened due to fracking.
Yes.
And I think they feel like they haven't been heard by the state. And can you address that?
Sure. So there's, it's a fairly complex issue, but let me, just for the people that are watching, let me give it kind of an overview. So a lot of the people are concerned about seismicity studies and the seismicity that happens down in the ground as it relates to drilling, as it relates to injection water supply wells, and disposal wells, okay? Mostly disposal wells. So in those disposal wells, one of the questions, or one of the studies that came out of SMU was fairly liberal in the way that they presented their responses. I think that's a fair way to say it. And they were trying to project that conclusively, all oil and gas is bad. All everything is causing all these earthquakes and all this kind of stuff. And credit the Railroad Commission did their own independent study that was truly, I would say, based in science and not done with emotion, and was really appropriate, and showed that, hey, this is not exactly the way it was presented. So, and in fact, the Railroad Commission denied a few applications for some of the disposal wells up in that area because they determined that where the disposal well was going to go was in the proximity of a fault line. And so they said, hey, we're not going to approve this one. So I think that the general public needs to know that as railroad commissioners, we need to be aware of the surroundings. The geological structures in Texas are different. It's not the same in the Eagle Ford Shale as it is in the West Texas play, or as it is in some of the other areas. But we need to make sure also that we're being vigilant. And I think that's what the general public wants to know. Are we letting responsible drillers drill, and people that are bad actors, are we holding them accountable? And I think that's what people want to know. The other thing is that technology has increased a lot in the last 50 years. I mean, just look. I've got 2 iPhones and I got a dang smartwatch, and good Lord. So the ability to identify different things that are happening beneath the surface, like the seismicity study, we've got better technology that gives us a better picture kind of what's happening downhole, and we need to use it to our best to serve the public, not scare the public. When you look at like New Jersey, their formation is totally different. Their water formation, their oil formation, it's totally different than what we have here in Texas. The last thing I'll just tell you real quick is that in Texas, our aquifers that we have, generally speaking, going back to those water letters and that tax that I was talking about, generally speaking, from 0 to 2,500 feet is our drinking water table in most of the aquifers in the state of Texas. Once you get below that 2,500 feet, now you get into what they call brackish, saline, all these other types of water that have a higher TDS count that makes it not eligible for a public water supply well. And you have an opportunity to actually make sure that you're protecting the public, because the water's 1 to 2,500, and the oil, for example, these big horizontal wells they're drilling, they're like 15,000 feet deep. And then after they go down 15,000, then they're going across a mile, and then the frack is taking place. So I asked a very liberal person, I said, if your neighbor spills a glass of Clorox 3 miles from your house, did it impact you? Well, of course not. It couldn't make it through all the walls and the rocks and the so please apply a little bit of common sense when we're having this discussion, not so much liberal emotion. So.
Well, I'll piggyback onto that one. We've had an issue here for years with a company coming in and wanting to put toxic chemicals into our old wells, the old Conroe oil field. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, the commission did not approve it. However, TCEQ, it's been sitting there, and it's in litigation still. Mm-hmm. If they did what they were talking about doing, the potential to destroy our drinking water and our aquifers from here all the way to Galveston could take place. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen a big push from the commission to to do anything. They haven't, they've backed us to a certain extent, but we're still fighting this, and we may lose. And it's an old oil field. The casings aren't good. Are you willing to fight the fight to be able to stop this from taking place?
So, and here's a great example of where we talked about being fair and predictable, and also at the same time making sure that we're protecting the private property rights of those individuals. And one of the things that y'all haven't asked about is, kind of our staff. Our pipeline inspectors at the Railroad Commission, they're paid somewhere between, right around $50,000 a year is kind of an average mean salary. And we educate them, get them trained, and then FAMSA, the federal pipeline guys, they come in and poach them because they're willing to pay them $70,000 or $80,000 right off the bat. So one of the things I think that we provide a better environment is by working on how we are working to retain staff that we've already trained. And so that's one of the things that I think helps situations like that, because you maintain some of the historical knowledge, historical information, people that are familiar with what's taking place. There's also a similar situation is some of the disposal pits that they're looking at doing that are above ground disposal pits. So now, you're talking about the smell and everything else that goes along with it. So it's an issue that we have to think about. The other thing is you have to think about when we're shutting in wells and when we're creating orphan wells, because if you create an environment that is not conducive for those operators to run it, well, now you create a liability for the state, because there's a lot of operators, they just walk away. And now, in my opinion, now you've got the worst of all scenarios. You've got a government agency that's responsible for all this resources left in the ground and all these casings that are deteriorating and things like that. And I think that's where we have to, that I think is where we increase what we're doing and how we're doing. And then I think that is what puts a better product on the market for the landowners and for the citizens in the state of Texas, because now we're doing a better job at regulating those things. So there's a whole bunch of things we can do to make that situation better. And the litigation, I think that'll be interesting to see how it comes out. But we have to put the public trust and protection of the public, it's key. Because without that, why do we need to drill the oil wells? So.
Okay, we got about 7 minutes or so.
Can I carry on with that one?
No, next one time around. We're over about 2.5 minutes.
Oh, 7 minutes for questions and answers, or 7 minutes for him?
For him.
Okay.
Okay, so under the general category, to what extent are you in favor of subsidies for alternative energy? You said not at all.
Not at all.
Are you in favor of the depletion allowance? And if not, what would you do with it?
Am I in favor of the what?
Depletion allowance for oil and gas companies.
So the question winds up being, making sure that we've got a fair and predictable environment. I want to make sure that we've got, we've got that working. Making sure that they can go out there and do what they're doing is going to be important. I think that we have to get some more information on the depletion rates that they're utilizing. So I'd like to see some more information on that. So I'm kind of an open book on that one right now.
Okay. It's been said that we're running out of hydrocarbons.
Yeah, they're lying.
Shouldn't we be pouring money into research for the new fuel of the future, or whatever that is?
I think we should be pouring money in how we get people to learn about being in the oil and gas business, so we can, get more. I mean, think about it. Champagne was created by accident. Hydraulic fracturing created years ago. Horizontal fracturing created years ago. And I think we get out of the way, let the market be the market, and inquisitive and inventful ladies and gentlemen are going to find new ways to either build a better mousetrap or use better cheese.
You had talked earlier about changing the name to the Energy Commission, and that would allow the public to have more knowledge of what was going on. So what does the public do with that knowledge?
So I think it does two things. I think it holds the elected officials accountable, right, which we all agree is very important. And also, it gets the boogeyman out of the closet. Because again, knowledge is power, and so if we empower them with what the commission's actually doing, that's why I suggest doing it as a constitutional amendment, because now you force all these groups around the state of Texas to educate on what the subject means, so then you don't have to worry about it being eroded later on in the future. And by doing it as a constitutional amendment, the budget's already allocated for those constitutional amendments and everything that comes in place, so now it's not even costing you extra to do the right thing, increase the transparency, and equip the public better to know what's truth and what's fact. I mean, I hate to use the fake news slogan, but they need to know what fake news is. And again, if we get them to look more at what the Railroad Commission is doing, then I think we snuff out a lot of those liberal boogeymans, if you will, that are out there.
Right, and what can the public do to bring and address concerns directly to the commission?
So the commission meetings are open to the public, but at the same time, not everybody can go to Austin in the middle of the day. So as a commissioner, I think it's incumbent upon us to go out and hold our own public forums and make sure that we're engaging the public and really presenting yourself with the opportunity for people to ask you questions in those smaller, intimate settings, because going to a commission meeting, it's like going to court, and nobody ever wants to go to court, and so it can be intimidating. So I think we have a responsibility to the elected body, to the citizens of Texas, to really make the circuit and go to the. I think we should be going to elementary schools and telling them, how many of y'all have one of these phones? The oil and gas industry put this in your hand to be able to work. And again, exposing them to the truth so they can critically think. So those little girls that want to be engineers, they'll think about, going in and being an engineer in the petroleum industry, or the little boys, or whatever the case is. So we have to do a better job of winning that battle and not letting the liberals take all the opportunities.
All right, Bob.
I thought we were out of time.
No, you were out of time on that.
Yeah, I understand. So, to go back to the last conversation that we had, you mentioned increasing the salaries for some of the employees. At what point do you feel like government officials are overpaid? When the governor makes $150,000 approximately a year, who in the state should be making more than what the governor makes for the amount of responsibility that he has?
Who in the state should be making more than the governor should make? Well, so several things that exist in that question. Paying people appropriately, I'm not opposed to. When we're talking about, government officials, man, my skin crawls every time we talk about it. So I think that, again, we need to make sure that we're being transparent, engaging the voters, letting them know that it's open government. And again, if you look at executive payments and things like that, for people that are working hard, I don't think people think that it's out of kilter. But the question is, I think really what your question is, how do we readjust the cash so that the people that need to be retained are retained? Is that really?
That's kind of along those lines.
Okay. That's why I think having a self-directed agency allows you to really focus on what your mission is. And again, at the commission that I was at, we were told, you have 3 years to sink or swim. If you cannot function within your own budget, you will automatically self-sunset. So to me, as a business guy, I was like, oh yeah, let's make every government agency have to operate like this. Because it forces those people, even if they're good people, if you're in a bureaucratic bubble, you don't always think about, hey, how much is that ream of paper I just wasted because I printed the wrong thing because I was lazy? How much does that, or at the real estate commission, we had we had a bunch of square footage that was allocated for file cabinets. Well, we figured out, look, if we just digitize this and put it into a digital format, the money we're gonna save on space, we're gonna decrease our footprint, the rise over run equation is gonna pay for itself in a very short period of time, so let's do it. So I think that's, some of the things, but we don't need to waste opportunities. There was a big IT program that was related to T4s at the Railroad Commission that my opponent oversaw, and it's called POPs for short, and it still is not functioning. So, if you're gonna manage something, manage it right and make sure that we're getting our ROI out of it. And again, I think that's how we get to shifting the budget to where you're funding the mission critical people and you're not wasting it on, nice to haves.
You got time for one more question?
All right.
You believe in term limits?
I believe in term limits. I believe in term limits.
Okay. How long do you plan to serve?
My plan is to be here for 12 years and see what the Lord does from there. But I'd be happy being there. I'm 42 years old, so I'm kind of a young guy. And again, I think that in a statewide election like this, the citizens of Texas, they execute their own term limits at the ballot box. And if we're increasing transparency, I think that we'll have a lot of people that are term limited out by the voters real quick. So, I support the way the Constitution currently is written in the state of Texas, and as such. But again, yes, I support term limits.
Okay. Got a few more seconds here. How much is each commissioner paid? Do you know what the going rate is?
Right at $147,000. 147 to 152, approximately.
Okay, is this a step up or down for you in income, or step up or down in income?
Man, I'd have to mitigate that. My wife's a corporate CPA, and I've got a lot of business that I do. So I think it's ultimately going to probably be about a wash.
Sounds good. So we can close now, or if you want, are you done? Yeah. Okay. Any more questions?
I'm good.
Okay. You want to go ahead and close it?
Sure.
About 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I thank you guys for hosting this today. And again, Weston Martinez running for Texas Railroad Commissioner for the great state of Texas, and it's just the opportunity to take my conservative principles and values, take my business experience, take my experience as a commissioner for the great state of Texas, and put it to work for the citizens of Texas to really, like I said earlier, benefit what we're doing and how we get people back to work and how we really keep the Texas miracle alive is an awesome opportunity. It's not something I take lightly, and I will wake up every day to work hard and make sure that we're putting the citizens of Texas first, and make sure that we're, leading the way on Texas energy, helping Texas be energy dominant. And again, I just would encourage the voters out there to visit my website, westonfortexas.com. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter and some of those social media things. If you don't know what that is, ask your grandkids, they can get you on there. And I think, I know that we're at a crucial time in our country's history, and I believe that all of the voters that are out there, just like the people that are here today, I believe that they know that we have to do something different if we want different results. And just want to remind you, again, I'm pro-life, pro-gun, pro-family, pro-Israel. At the end of the day, I'm pro-Texas, and I'm going to help make sure that we keep Texas, Texas, and that we get people back to work in the oil and gas field. And this is an exciting job to have the privilege to serve you every day with.
All right, great. Thank you very much for coming over.